So a conciliatory tone here, and then White House, or American media saying White House was talking about 100% tariffs that EU should impose on India and China. What should one make of the voices that are emerging from the United States of America? I have a power-packed panel joining me on the show. Dr. Walter Ladwig is Senior Associate Professor of International Relations at King's College London, joins me on the broadcast. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former ambassador to France. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, former Deputy Chief of Mission to the European Union, Belgium and Luxembourg. Seema Sirohi, a very well-respected columnist and author of Friends with Benefits, the India-US story. In a moment, we will be joined by Arun Kumar Sharma, Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. But Dr. Ladwig, President Trump wrote that he looks forward to speaking with his very good friend Prime Minister Modi in the upcoming weeks. He's certain there will be no difficulty in a successful conclusion of a trade deal for our great countries. Do you see this as damage control exercise by President Trump? What do you make of this Truth Social post?
Well, I hope you're not expecting me to explain Trump to the world or make sense of his actions, but I will simply say that in some respects, we've seen this story before. If we go back to the first Trump administration, we do remember all of the accomplishments in national security cooperation and defense between the US and India, but there were some real bad periods of time on trade. Trump used to call India the trade or the tariff king or the tariff queen. In 2019, he withdrew the GSP preferences for India. There were arguments about Harley Davidsons and so forth. So unfortunately, this seems to be part of his belligerent tactic of sort of browbeating and bullying aside, and then trying to kind of assume that sort of softens things up and then try to put out a hand of friendship. And so we may just be seeing a more enhanced, a more extreme version of that story.
Okay, but Dr. Ladwig, in your view, are we over the hill when it comes to the bullying tactics, or will they continue to blow hot, blow cold till the time a deal is inked, something perhaps by October, November?
Look, I desperately hope so, because these two countries have a range of interests in national security and defense, the future of the Indo-Pacific, that are much bigger and more important than trade ties and a couple percentages of tariffs. The real concern here is that Trump risks blowing big holes in a bilateral relationship that, successive U.S. administrations have spent 2.5 decades trying to build. His proxies in particular have been going around saying some of the most horrible, insulting things, and it's going to take a long time to come back from that or say, oh, that was just a negotiating tactic.
Okay, Seema Sirohi, how does this square up with reports coming from the United States that White House wants the European Union to impose 100% tariffs on China and India for Russian oil?
Yeah, so the picture is not clear at all, and it may be part of a choreography that a lot of people in Washington said that it was Trump's biggest strategic mistake to blow a hole through the India relationship. So maybe he's trying to claw back some of that. And I would say that on the one side, Peter Navarro is saying the most obnoxious things. Yes. On the other side, President Trump is trying to create a common space. I think Navarro is sort of taking care of the MAGA crowd while the White House tries to do business with other countries. So, as I wrote today in my column, that nothing is clear and it's all very rocky. The FT report that Trump had asked the Europeans to put 100% tariffs on India to put more pressure on Russia is an example. So this pleasantries being exchanged between the Prime Minister and the President is all well and good. I would say if a trade deal can be signed quickly, sooner rather than later, that would be the only positive sign, I would say, concrete positive sign.
Okay, so all of this is very fluid right now. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, but would the European Union risk its supply chains and trade with China and India and impose additional tariffs? Or can they, like the US, threaten China but impose tariffs only on India, or would they rather not do that at all?
Me. My sense is that the EU may not act on this threat. But frankly, Gaurav, if there is no discrimination against India, and if the EU can bring down its imports of energy to zero, if the US can cut its imports from Russia to zero, they do buy some fertilizer, some palladium, and some uranium. If everybody, and if China brings it down to zero, then my advice to India will be look at it. You don't want to be the only one really doing this. But short of that, India's main position has been that we are discriminated against in this whole thing. But really, reacting to what some of your other co-panelists said, my sense is there is mixed messaging coming out of Washington, and there is good cop, bad cop, obviously. But where I think I disagree with what some people said before me is that I don't think it's just about trade, frankly. There are other issues which are currently bedeviling the relationship. One is certainly he's getting extremely irritated at Putin and Russia, and he's taking it out on others. And one of them can be India in terms of collateral damage. There is also, I think, the personal pique at India for whatever reason. There, I think I'm happy that the two leaders at least have made it up, and I'm glad they're talking in terms of meeting. Although from an Indian perspective, I would like them to meet after the trade deal is done, not before. I frankly think it's much better for the two leaders to meet once the negotiators have really sorted out the thorny issues. My sense, by the way, and I might be the only person on the panel who says it, I really think 99% of the trade deal is done. In my view, this was never about just trade. There were a lot of other issues which were brought in. And in any case, with President Trump, it's not just about trade, because there was Russian oil, there was maybe a personal pique associated with Pakistan, Nobel Prize, whatever. So I think we are looking at a whole range of issues. But I'm personally happy that other conversations between India and the US have continued. And that includes even the joint military exercise. So that's good news.
Yes. And since you mentioned the good cop, bad cop routine, Ambassador Sajanhar, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, quoted as saying in the American media, words to the effect that Trump's post is a chance for India to apologize and deal with the US, or it won't end well for India if they don't come around soon. So is that only for the MAGA crowd, or they're playing this good cop, bad cop, and isn't he vitiating the pitch or the atmosphere further?
No, absolutely, Gaurav. Thank you very much for having me. You're right. I think it could be a good cop, bad cop, but as some of the other panelists have said, it's very difficult to decipher what President Trump actually has in mind. But there is also the speculation that all these people, Peter Navarro, Howard Lutnick, etc., they might be basically parroting what Trump has been saying, largely to curry favor with the Trump, because he's given them adequate latitude. Okay, they have used even expressions like it is benefiting the Brahmins at the expense of ordinary Indian people, and it's Modi's war, etc. So these are very, very derogatory remarks, insulting remarks. But they are just trying to amplify Trump's message. But now I would imagine that Trump has changed his tune. Possibly these worthies would also tamper down on their pronouncements, and hopefully we will not see any more of it. But I think
Arun Kumar Sharma,
for that,
yes, go on, sir. Yes,
yeah,
kindly.
quickly. I think the reason for this, why Mr. Trump is making this change, number one, India has stood firm in the face of all these threats and coercion. India has not capitulated like most of the other countries, whether Japan, Korea, Indonesia, this, that, and the other. And then also, I think the messaging that went out, the signaling that went out, both from Tianjin, after the images that came out from Tianjin of the three leaders, and also of the virtual meeting that was organized by President Lula of the BRICS countries. And I think they took a unified stand there and sent out a very clear message to America as far as these high tariffs are concerned. So I
Fair
think
enough. I
there
want
was
to bring in Arun
backlash.
Kumar Sharma quickly into this conversation. Mr. Sharma, strategic partners and trade require predictability. India-US ties, and especially under Trump 2.0, there is no predictability. You have no idea what he may say or do tomorrow. We are told, as Ambassador Mohan Kumar was also pointing out, a framework was ready by July, 99% ready by July, and suddenly things changed because when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went to America in February, they worked out how things would be done. So social media posts clearly cannot be the only way for India and America, two comprehensive strategic partners, to remain in touch unless the level of trust is so low. You say anything privately, it may just be misconstrued tomorrow.
So the issue is, I think that we have to really recognize reality. The reality is the following, that President Trump is playing a multi-country game. It's not only just US, India. India is only one factor. He's optimizing for Russia. He's optimizing for China. He's optimizing for EU, and he's optimizing for India. That is the harsh reality. That's the first point. The second point is that he is very transactional, as we have discussed on this panel multiple times. And long-term relationships really don't matter to this president. That's very, very clear, certainly the relationship with India. The long-term damage is not, nobody is really taking into account the damage that has been done, I would say, and they'll take a long time to repair, in the trust that was built up over the last 20, 25 years. And memories of our previous estranged democracy times have really become, I think, very fresh in the establishment in New Delhi. I have no doubt about that. That's the second point. The third point is, I think, as a global hegemonic power, I think President Trump is a believer in unpredictability, just to keep people off balance, so that he can put pressure on them, because they're always guessing what United States will do next, and they can't really prepare and position themselves for the next conversation. And the fourth point, I think, is very clear: this good cop, bad cop type of point, where he's basically saying, "Listen, we have people who are going to take our extreme positions. We will convey our extreme positions to put the Indians on the defensive. And on the other hand, he wants to keep the channel of communication open, which is why we are getting these, random conciliatory statements that come suddenly after really a barrage of nasty ones."
Okay. Dr. Ladwig, India is looking for what has often been described as a fair and balanced agreement for both the countries. US has tried to ram through agreements that keep America first. So is there a middle ground? Is there a meeting ground? Because with several partners, and including, as some even on our panel have argued, that his America First policy is partially responsible for the resignation of the Japanese Prime Minister, for example. Will the US president be agreeable to a win-win and not US take all, like he's done either with countries like Japan or South Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, or the European Union?
So I think Trump at his heart is more concerned with sort of style over substance. So something that could be packaged as a win is what he's looking for. I mean, if we really want to look at nuts and bolts, trade between the US and India is not huge compared to other big economies and other big nations. So the things that they're arguing over and the percentages and the specific industries are not significant in terms of some of these negative trends that your reporting identified for the US economy. So I think as long as it allows him to claim some sort of victory and claim that he was able to negotiate down or talk Prime Minister Modi into something, that's at the end of the day really what he's looking for.
And is he likely to get that? By all accounts, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, some of the countries, they may have kowtowed to America. India clearly hasn't done that. And now some of these countries, I'm told there's a rethink even in the European Union. South Korea is not too happy. In Japan, the Prime Minister had to put in his papers. Is that going to have an adverse impact on Trump?
Trade negotiations, Gaurav, are a funny thing. It actually allows both sides to claim victory at the same time. And that will not be obvious. So I completely agree with Dr. Walding. You will have to somehow give a victory to both sides. Both sides can handle their domestic audience by saying we have won. And that means essentially that India will have to say our red lines have been respected. Americans, Trump will have to say, I have penetrated this huge market in India. I think it's perfectly possible. Anybody who has been associated with trade negotiations knows that the language can be ambiguous and it allows both sides to claim victory. I also believe, and that's the last point I will make, I do believe there are important sections in the United States which have come to the conclusion that the costs of alienating India far exceeds the benefits.
Oh, absolutely. But then are there enough people, level-headed people in the United States to see this through is the big question. And Seema Sirohi, the deals with the European Union and Japan had promises of $750 billion or $500 billion investment pledges to the United States of America, or at least these big headlines that Donald Trump wants, that he can claim victory. Vietnam and Indonesia are supposed to have given massive market access. With India, there are very strong red lines and no talk of billions of dollars being invested in the US. How do you see this deal go ahead? Unless Trump realizes, as Ambassador Mohan Kumar was putting it, and Ambassador Sajjan before that, that the strategic ties are far more important than the trade deal.
Look, the way other countries and the European Union arrived at a deal was to sort of have this huge, impressive number for investments that would come to the US. Now, that's an intention, not a legal commitment. Besides, the investment is to come from the private sector in those countries. And no government in a democracy can sort of direct the private sector to do X, Y, and Z. So I think there are two parts to what's going on. One is the actual trade deal, which India has been negotiating and taken extremely seriously, sector by sector, and how much you can give, how much you can take. The other side is the headline side. So that Trump can say to his people, oh, I managed to open up India, I managed to do this. Whether that actually happens is up for question. We don't know. And I think others gambled on that because, over the next 3 years, whether those $500 billion come in terms of investment or don't, at least they have avoided the very extreme punitive tariffs. That's the point.
Yeah, and settled for that 15%.
Very important.
So in your view, should India have done that, Ambassador Sajjan, given that headline that Donald Trump wanted, or is the United States realizing that Trump's trade policy may be at odds with the US foreign policy, especially on the Indo-Pacific? There are some who say, no, we are over-interpreting his social media posts because, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, White House spokespersons, they've clearly now started using the word Asia-Pacific and not Indo-Pacific.
I think, it'll come a full circle, Gaurav, and I don't think it is, a very temporary phenomena, but I think it's going to continue. And, Mr. Trump will take it in this vein, and we'll see, other elements of the relationship coming up. But, on this, I am also convinced, Gaurav, that the deal is by and large done. Everything is done. And, in that, the India's red lines are very clearly reflected. And India had sort of, made that the deal was lying on Trump's table. It was lying on Trump's table from the end of June. I know because, I was being told by our own people every day, today he's going to sign it, tomorrow he's going to sign it. He never signed it because, he thought all the other countries had succumbed to his pressure, to his coercion. India will also succumb to his pressure. Even with the deal that is there, he can claim huge victory because on industrial tariffs, we have given them, as the reports seem to suggest, we have given him a huge thing. So, he can say that, whatever was not available to us, we have been able to penetrate that. He's been saying it's the tariff king, but I have been able to do that. I have been able to go into the country, and of course,
And
we will,
yet it didn't happen. And yet it didn't happen. So perhaps he thought India will also buckle under pressure, and that hasn't happened since June till date. But Arun Sharma, has the US president realized that trade with India is not that one-sided disaster he made it out to be, that India is clearly not a dead economy, and his actions of imposing 25% tariffs initially and then an additional 25% sanctions, it had only strengthened the BRICS partnership, which was counterproductive for the US?
No, I think he made a lot of calculations. Not all of them panned out to be as per his plan. But I think we have to look at it, at his view, as other panelists have said, the fact that he's not looking at it just trade alone. I think that's where it's geopolitics more than trade, in my view. I think the trade nitty-gritty, as most people already know, is almost done. What is complicating is the geopolitics, his pressure on Putin on the one side, his desire to make a deal with China, because there's also a view that part of the reason he's given a free pass to China and he's imposed those tariffs on India till today or till 2 days ago was that he was trying to give a signal to China that, look, we're willing to dump India, let's make a deal. And I'm giving you a free pass when you're more important to me than India is. So I don't know how necessarily that calculation is still valid, but the fact is completely indisputable that this is more than a trade issue. This is more of a geopolitics issue, and it's more of a win-win or versus win-lose issue. This president believes in a win-lose thing where he's the winner, the other person is the loser, and he's trying to optimize. At the same time, I think we have to remember he's a deal maker. He wants a deal. There's no question about that, which is why he keeps sending these messages to Prime Minister Modi to keep the dialogue open. He's saying, look, this deal is off the table. He's never said that, and he's not likely to say it. So I think he will continue to push India till he gets the best deal he thinks he can get. Thank you.
Okay, and Dr. Ladwig, the last 30 seconds that I have on this part of the show, you think there's a reconciliation on the cards, or is that reconciliation likely to be short-lived, given India's stance, given India's red lines on agriculture, dairy, fisheries, Russian oil, or will the American president, and I'm sorry I'm asking you to second-guess him, will he take a long-term view?
I think the people around him will push him towards a long-term view, and I think there's a lot of structural pressure on both countries to move beyond this and look beyond this. So I think if we go back and look at the first administration and the trade hiccups that preceded deepened cooperation, I'm hoping that will characterize this period of time as well.
And I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. Many thanks to such a fine panel of guests joining me on India First with their perspective. Helps us clearly understand the situation as it stands right now.